The fact is, it's a new year, but the mission remains the same here. We want to make significant progress towards creating the healthcare of tomorrow, where a simpler, more consumer-centered experience draws more people to engage in their health and wellness. That's it, y'all. That's the mission. That's what we're here for.
New choices, new players, new models of care. You know consumer first healthcare is everywhere. For us to build the future, to see what's new, we gotta look at the world from a different point of view. Consumer innovation ain't going away. I say it's here to stay. Today it leads the way. We gotta drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer first health is the evolution. Status quo or like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go.
Hey, welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered healthcare. This is episode 382. I'm Jared Johnson, and here's what's going to go down today. We have a special Flava of the Week featuring a list of industry voices that you compiled for us. Whom did you recommend that we follow, watch, read, and listen to? And why are we asking you to add your voice to the list? I'll talk about that. Then we begin 2025 with the state of the state in consumer-centered care. It's a new year, but the mission remains the same. Make significant progress towards creating the healthcare of tomorrow, where a simpler, more consumer-centered experience draws more people to engage in their health and wellness. Let's do this, y'all. Are you ready? Let's go.
Flava of the Week.
I put out the call and you answered. I asked you on LinkedIn to tell me who you follow, watch, read, and listen to on the topic of consumer-centered healthcare. And in a tribute to this community, you shared more than 40 names. Now, I know there are many, many more, so please don't fret if your name is not on this list, but this is an outstanding start, y'all. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way I can name all of them in under 2 minutes, and there's no way, even if I did, that you could remember all of them. Well, not to worry, we will list them all in the show notes. And as far as naming them in 2 minutes, there's only one way to find out. Ready, set, go. Journalists Blake Madden from Hospitology, Chrissy Farr from Second Opinion Media, Jane Sarasohn-Kahn from Health Populi, and Jane Brubaker from Plain English Media. Patient experience professionals Adam Bunke, formerly from Talkiatry, Jennifer Carron Passon from BJC Health System, Rachel Biblow from Journal of Patient Experience, and Valerie Choniuk from Agilon Health. Women digital health entrepreneurs Lynn Doughane and Nanette Sene from Juno Technologies, Sarah Lambert from Aura Medical, and Yvonne Bombard from Genetics Advisor. Provider leaders Alan Shoebridge from Providence, Andrew Chang from UChicago Medicine, Amanda Todorovich from Cleveland Clinic, Chris Pace from Banner Health, Christina Valls from Cedar Sinai, Dow Bergsma from Piedmont Health, Don Stanziano from Banner Health, and Jay Gearhart from Atrium Health. Healthcare marketing, IT, and consumer leaders Ahava Leibtag from Ahava Media Group, Ann Summers Hogg from Clayton Christensen Institute, Ben Cash from Reason One, Callie Means from TrueMed, Dr. Casey Means from Levels, Chris Boyer from Touchpoint Media, Chris Hemphill from Wobot, Chris Bevolo from BPD, Gary Druckenmiller from Innovator, Jhaymee Gier, DexCare, Jhaymee Tynan from Korn Ferry, Judy Neiman from the Forum for Healthcare Strategists, Martha Van Berkel from Schema App, Nick Glimsdahl from VDS, and Steve Koch from Cast and Hue. And finally, consultants Carrie Lycan, James Gardner, Christy Dickinson, Lila Wagner, Todd Dunn, and Dr. Zev Newworth. Phew! Now I can't think of a better way to wrap the year than by celebrating the contributions of all of these and many, many more leaders who are using their voice to make healthcare more consumer-centered. And now I'm turning it to you. I invite you to use your voice in 2025. We need more momentum if we want to keep this ball from rolling all the way back down this hill. Now, as a community, I know we'll do everything we can to keep that from happening. And by adding your voice to those of leaders like those whom we just listed, we can make more progress than ever before. In fact, I'm counting on it. Let's commit ourselves to use our voices to generate more momentum behind consumer-centered care once and for all. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the Flava of the Week.
The flow.
Hey out there, we want to try a slightly different format this time. And as we wrap the year, I want to give a state of the state of consumer-centered care. And hopefully this guides our journey and our episodes and our season as we head into 2025. Because the fact is, it's a new year, but the mission remains the same here. We want to make significant progress towards creating the healthcare of tomorrow, where a simpler, more consumer-centered experience draws more people to engage in their health and wellness. That's it, y'all. That's the mission. That's what we're here for. And there are a lot of things we've learned along the way. For instance, better marketing alone won't get us there. Better tech alone won't get us there. Better strategic plans on their own certainly won't get us there. So let's go there for a second and talk about the destination. I'm going to add a little color to some themes that came up in the predictions episodes, particularly the one that I shared a little bit in last week's episode with James and Zane. I talked about how I feel like traditional care could be squandering their opportunity to become more consumer-centered and see the benefits and the ROI of those efforts. And I also want to kind of mix in a theme that we heard from several different predictions about the move to preventive, longevity-based care as opposed to sick care only. Those of you who have been listening for a while, you know that just sick care in and of itself isn't always a destination, and that we talk about it a lot about how that's kind of short-sighted if that's all we're focusing on. I mean, for crying out loud, our theme for season 11 has talked about adjacent areas: sleep, weight loss, fitness, nutrition, mental health. We've talked about how these things maybe don't need to be called adjacent anymore. Maybe they are more front and center when we talk about primary care and when we talk about what a consumer-centered version of health and wellness looks like. So our theme for season 11 has been how the frontiers of digital, retail, and traditional care can work together to create this better version of healthcare. Now, let me add a couple of things to that, and I start thinking about how things like, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but access to sick care isn't necessarily the overall goal here. It's for people to be in better health. It's to improve the overall health of America. And sick care has a big place in that when we need specialty care, when we need acute care, when time is of the essence, when things are going wrong, we need it. We need this level of care that is out there in most health systems in the country. I would say most providers who are practicing, the vast majority of them, care about their patients and are doing everything they can to help improve their lives and in many cases save their lives. So just like with the manifesto that we originally put out there about consumer first health, we don't want to take away from the care that's going on in these areas. And at the same time, we want to talk about and recognize how the picture is bigger than that. And it's a lot easier to see if we just put consumers' needs and experiences and desires at the center of more healthcare business decisions. In fact, if that was the case, you might not even need a podcast like ours because we would all agree. So I mentioned this is a state of the state. So that kind of leads me to 4 particular areas of our current state of consumer-centered care. And they were based on a lot of the guests we've had so far this season. Again, in January, our season 11 continues. But I want to go back to some of the pieces that many of our guests shared along the way. And the first trend there in our current state of consumer-centered care is the fact of that we're better able to understand consumers' healthcare choices and behaviors, especially around new things like GLP-1s, semaglutides, right? So just listen to these themes from 4 of our guests: Doug Hirsch, the founder of GoodRx, Michelle Davey from Wheel, Michael Botta from Sesame, and Oliver Karaz from ZocDoc.
You have to think about the downstream effects too, right? Obviously, we spent the last few minutes here talking about purchasing a prescription at the pharmacy counter. But when consumers don't purchase it, and I've sat with many pharmacy executives who say once a drug gets over $20, $25, people just say, screw it, I won't get it. And of course, you think about that transaction in and of itself, but then you don't realize, okay, so now the consumer stopped taking their heart medications, and now the consumer ends up having additional medical issues, may end up in the ER, may end up not being able to work, take care of their children. I mean, the downstream effects are huge, right? And consumers have filled over 184 million prescriptions using GoodRx that they otherwise simply literally would have walked away and not purchased. We've saved the healthcare system over $5 billion in preventable ER visits and hospitalizations. You know, these are the kinds of things that we don't think about. We think about that individual transaction. But when you stop taking the medication you're supposed to take and you're not adhering to your regimen, you have these incredible downstream effects, which honestly, we talk about dollars and cents and profit and loss. I think about the country as a whole. I think about our health system as a whole, where we have all these incredible costs as a result of just making it so hard for people to get from point A to point B and just fill their prescription at that counter.
I really think that wellness and non-traditional health players, whether that's e-commerce, who are great at shopping, right, are finding ways to access consumers where they want to be met and integrating already into that and driving healthcare on top of that so that we do become more preventative when we think about virtual or care overall, and hopefully redefine the definition of healthcare. And that's fitness, that's food. I think we're seeing a lot of food. Food is medicine, all of that. I'm super passionate about that space. I think that's the very top of the value chain as we think about how do we change healthcare and really think about empowering better experiences for consumers and access, all of the problems I could wax and wane about forever, but I'm really excited about that.
So to me, we certainly were surprised how many people were coming to Sesame for weight loss. But in retrospect, I think we were wrong to be surprised. Like, it's pretty obvious when there's an effective medical treatment for something that is of major concern to somebody's life, obesity, sleep, another one. It only makes sense that people are going to take that path if it's available to them. So I'd expect to see this continue. And I think more things will go down this path over time too.
Patients really value the option of telehealth, even though it's one of these things that they end up not using very often, if at all. And so I'm not saying folks shouldn't be investing in telehealth. It is something that consumers value. It's not just not something that they use. It's, I guess, it's a little bit like buying an off-road car. How often do you really go off-road? But you like the idea of being able to do that. And so we found our off-road vehicle for healthcare. And occasionally it does create increased utility.
Okay, so the second trend is how the influence of retail and consumer brands is evolving, particularly how we hope that we can reduce the overall threat level and seek partnerships with traditional care and digital health. So now you're going to hear from three other guests that we've had this season. First, Ben Zaniello, the Chief Medical Officer at Best Buy Health, Irina Pelfrey from Albertsons, and Dr. Sanjay Shetty, President of Centerwell, which, as you know, is going through with their plans to take over some of the abandoned Walmart health clinics. So they're talking about overall preventive, community-based health. So here's how some of those retail and consumer brands are evolving, starting with Dr. Zaniello.
We think internally a lot about the cyclical journey of consumers to patients and back again. And yes, people say, well, that's because you're Best Buy and you work in retail, so you think about consumers. And I would say, well, as a physician, I think also a lot about patients and how, while we do literally consume healthcare when we go to a hospital, it is not simply the voluntary option of going into Best Buy to purchase a Aura ring or a blood pressure cuff because my physician recommended that I track that. So we try to think about this continuum of care and, again, how to support both the person as a consumer, the person as a patient, and, again, bring in that health system, but also bring in the health plan to the equation.
Preventive health is not easy, right? You have to have sustained motivation. So we're using some behavioral tools there to bring them to better nutrition and help them sustain that. How do we really at scale move people to think about preventive services? How do we get them to think about being agents of their own health?
It's just amazing the unlocks you can get when you have somebody laying eyes on a patient while they're in the home setting. There have been just amazing stories of recognizing that the real problem here was the lack of a shower chair or the lack of the carpets being tacked down, or this patient could really use better stairs in the back of the house because the stairs, a little bit of work on those stairs would reduce their fall risk immensely. And so those types of unlocks, when you're really looking at the patient at home, are things that a pure clinic-based model will never see.
All right. So again, those brands are evolving, right? Now, the third trend that we've seen and dived into a lot this season has to do with how, again, that predictions piece about how healthcare is squandering this opportunity potentially, how specifically how traditional care could be squandering it and could at the very least be putting us back if we don't take steps in an accelerated manner. And sometimes you kind of wonder just with a general approach towards retail and consumer brands from traditional care? Could you say that healthcare is petty? Could you say that traditional care has a scarcity mindset and feels threatened by a lot of things? I mean, the more we've talked about digital health, of how many decades now that we've moved towards digital health, and every step along the way feels like there've been a handful of clinical, of doctor innovators, of provider innovators, and the rest have just kind of gotten dragged along. I think it's fair to say that. So again, it might be another hot take here, but that is impacting what's possible with how quickly we can move towards a version of healthcare that's going to get more people to engage. And again, I'll keep coming back to better marketing, better tech, better strategic plans only get you so far. In fact, they don't get you very far at all when the product itself is so inclined to not consider the needs and wants and expectations of consumers. So that's why we're having this talk, y'all. Okay, so you're going to hear from two other guests here, Dr. Paul Thomas, who helps describe the direct primary care movement and why there's still a lot of momentum there, and we expect that to continue. And then you'll hear from Craig Karchner from Honor Health about, hey, why hasn't this worked yet? Like, why aren't we in a better place yet overall when we look at traditional care?
I sincerely believe that healthcare should be affordable, accessible, and excellent for everyone. And that's a radical statement because, as we know, healthcare is not affordable, accessible, and excellent for everyone in America. And using insurance-based models to seek primary care is a backwards way of accessing primary care.
I think most healthcare companies, at least that I have worked at or am aware of, they go to the EMR first strategy. They're an Epic client, so they're going to go Epic first. If Epic offers it, we're using that. I think the problem is, first off, Epic wasn't built as a consumer-facing tool at first. It has a lot now, but initially it wasn't. That's not its roots. That's not its heritage. So it's not always best in class, but it's also that you're never going to differentiate based on that alone, because there are too many Epic clients. And the same is true of other EMRs. Having an EMR-only strategy in terms of CX is not going to differentiate you. So you're not going to outpace your competitors.
All right. So the fourth trend here is the bridge to the next phase of sick care. And that means what I referred to at the very beginning of this overall move to preventive, longevity-based care. How can we get fewer people feeling sick and needing acute care, needing specialty care? Again, like when we're talking about the big picture, about reducing costs, about reducing burnout, about improving quality of care, all of those things see measurable, noticeable progress if we can improve the overall health of America, right? So when we look at what that means, that's why we have focused a lot this season on inviting guests from some of these organizations that are looking from the outside of traditional care and see roads to partnerships, but also see this road of focusing on an individual consumer, a health citizen, and their individual needs and expectations. So you'll hear next from several of those guests. You're going to hear from Holly Shelton from Aura. You're going to hear Jeff Cook, the CEO of Noom. You're going to hear Dr. Nora Abul-Hassan from 23andMe, and you're going to hear from Dr. Gordon Chen, who has recently, as you know, just started ThriveWell, this longevity-based approach and community-based approach to health. So let's hear again and be reminded of some of those pieces, some of those points of view, some of those preventive points of view.
When I first got my CVA, it was significantly higher than my actual age. I'm a former athlete. I've been really healthy most of my life, and I'm a pretty new mom. It was the first thing in maybe a decade that got me just so motivated to change my behavior. I instantly started focusing on my cardiovascular capacity. I started running. I started using Peloton again. I lowered my heart age by 9 years. And that's the Aura way, is that we want to build something that people are actually empowered to move.
Many folks are, of course, coming to Noom because they're looking to lose weight. Some looking actually to just look for healthy habits to adopt, helping essentially our mission. The mission of Noom is to empower everyone everywhere to live better longer. And so we see folks coming to Noom really for that cognitive behavioral therapy lesson, change the mindset to food, and help them lose weight. And we position the medication as essentially a way to accelerate your weight loss journey. There's actually a beautiful aspect of how kind of the GLP-1 works in concert, in tandem with the Noom program. When people are beginning a kind of a behavior change program and they're looking for healthy habits to adopt, they are more likely to stick with the habit, and it's more likely to become entrenched into maybe their persona if they have some early success with the habit.
As much as I love genetics, I'm a medical geneticist, I think about this all the time. It's not just about your genetics, though. It's a really key part of the story. But in addition to that, the way you live your life, your lifestyle choices, your environment, the food you eat, the exercise you do, the things like that we know impact our health, that influences your healthcare trajectory. And what we're getting better at is putting that information together and synthesizing it so that I can tell you what a trajectory looks like for you, but also can tell you what improvements you may want to make in your lifestyle, in the choices that you're making every day to impact that trajectory.
If we're focusing on the 5 drivers, personal, community, physical, nutritional, spiritual, a lot of mental health already solves itself. If you have the right purpose, community, you're sleeping well, you're eating well, you're exercise, right? All of these things. So I want to just encourage our listeners to not jump to the answer for the individual issue that someone's facing before we're really thinking about these 5 drivers of health and wellness. And I believe if you're going after that first, then that's the Pareto. Then 80% of the downstream issues solve themselves.
You know, what's really interesting about all of these points of view is I was going to focus initially on what the current state is and how we got there. And I don't think we need to focus so much on how we got here. I think we're all in a better state where we understand that. And I think we know and we get it, where we don't have to start from, why is this happening? I think thankfully that conversation has evolved about how we got here. And there is a growing recognition that we need to get to a better place. So there's this realization that has been growing and has been evolving when we talk about consumer experience. It's not just like user design. That's part of it. It's not even just service design. It's how these 4 parts come together. And the 4 parts are the economics, because as we know, if that isn't in place, then it's a non-starter, which is clearly one reason why there hasn't been more progress, is because there isn't widespread consensus about what those economics look like. Again, we come back to, we just feel like traditional care often feels a higher threat level of anything that says do something besides optimize your existing sick care models. That's where we are right now. So to get to a better place, we have to get those economics in place. Okay, so great. So we have the economics in place. Now what do we have to do? We have to have the experience design capabilities to create a better version, to create better products and services that are consumer-centered, that have those consumers' needs and wants and expectations placed at the center, and then create a care model or a care path or a journey from there. Again, having that as the center, which has not been the experience of the past few centuries of traditional medicine. Okay, so you have to have the economics, you have to have the experience design. Now you have to have some tech in place to execute, to build that vision, to build the thing you just designed. It's pretty clear by now. It is a combination of people and tech. I think we can just all reduce the threat level again to say tech will never take over the human aspects of healthcare. It will take over the parts that people don't want to do. So let's lean into that. Let's lean into how tech can improve the human parts. We're hearing it in pockets everywhere across the country. We're hearing little case studies here. We are hearing and seeing signals of it working. We just need to connect those dots and provide some industry standards. We need to provide some standardization. We need to truly gather the social proof here to move forward. And then the 4th piece, the marketing of it. That's great if we have finally felt proud of ourselves for designing consumer-centered products and services or improved our consumer experiences, but we have to help people know about it. We have to help them break through the fact of, I know you've had a poor experience in the past, and now we're going to show you something that we've done about it. That experience is easier. Come back and try this. Let's engage again. Let's re-engage you in your health journey. That in and of itself is a big process. It's a big piece here, but that's one of the 4 pieces. So the economics, the experience design, the tech to build it, and the marketing to help people know about it. That's how we're going to move forward here. And as we know by now, as we've gone through this phase of digital transformation, we see the need for change management. We see the need for consensus building, for shared goals. We see the need for open communication. We see the need for that culture that supports those 4 steps that we just brought together to have a successful consumer-centered strategy that actually works. So again, this has all been about where are we going, right? As we execute on this more in 2025, we can expect to see more momentum. We can expect to see more progress, and we can expect to see more industry-wide best practices and standards that we accept and can build on. We're not quite there yet, but we're working on it. We're working on it as an industry. And when I say we, it's probably important for me to say who's the we here. I'm talking about consumer-centered designers, operators, and leaders. All of you who are hopefully listening, who are thinking along these ways and just trying to get a bigger sense of what else is out there in the industry. You're all looking for the social proof to validate the work that you're doing and to improve and to see what those best practices are. So that's the we. We collectively, as designers, operators, and leaders in this space, have this opportunity, but we have to be united. We have to be more in lockstep here. We have to see this as a mission, as a community, and drive this direction at the same time. So one part of that, I think, is important to recognize some of the things that we probably can't do, the things that are out of scope for this community of listeners. And I would start with things like the misaligned incentives, right? What we've learned after 5 years of having the Consumer First Health Group think tank chats every month and almost 7 years now of this podcast is we can accept the limitations of what we're not able to change in the industry. And that starts with acknowledging that the misaligned incentives of sick care are truly what need to change in order to usher in this true consumer transformation. But we also know that we as this community don't have the power to do much about that. That is truly out of scope. What we do have the power to change, though, is to get much better at socializing and connecting the early adopters, those of you who are listening, who've designed consumer-first products, services, experiences, and better ways of doing things. This incremental progress is just as important to share as the bigger milestones that we're hearing. And all of that is better than keeping score of which retailer is making progress and which ones are fading away and have failed and they're pulling back on their investments. That conversation just doesn't help us with any type of progress in this manner. So I would encourage us to focus on connecting, finding more social proof, and working towards industry standards and best practices. That is how we're going to make a difference as a community. And that's how we're going to see this mission that has been the same for all these years to take that next step to get us to a better place. We need to cross that chasm. I mean, that means that our contribution and our power and our influence is to unite the early adopters and usher in the early majority of acceptance of what consumer-centered care looks like. So we need to scale those pockets. We need to add to that social proof, and that's how we can make a difference here. We also need to feel a sense of urgency about that. We need to connect back to this thought of designing products and services that are more consumer-focused requires us to just move faster. We need more momentum here. I talked about in the Flava of the Week when I was pointing out leaders who you recognize who are talking about consumer-centered care. I talked about the need to stand together to add your voices to that so that this ball doesn't roll all the way back downhill, because that is a possibility. It is possible that all of the momentum that we have felt up until now just gets dragged down back by the gravity of the status quo of how traditional care has always been done, and the experiences that are keeping people from engaging in their health just keep on happening. I don't think you want that. I don't want that. So that's why, to wrap all this together, we can focus on this new convergence of some of these ideas. So let me bring this all together, right? There's a lot of new stuff to talk about when it comes to the adjacent companies that healthcare systems should be partnering with, plus personal and consumer health devices and treatments and models and GLP-1s that should be aligned with my own personal health journey. And that's what consumer-centered health is designed to do. It's designed to ultimately create better products and services, ones that lead people to engage and re-engage in their health. So we can sit here all day. I've thought genuinely at times to flip the script on this podcast and just invite people to share stories of their difficulties engaging with the healthcare system. And I've thought ultimately that might not be as productive as shining a light on the bright spots, on the successes that are happening in and out of traditional care. So that's why I feel licensed to be able to confidently speak about things like direct primary care, health at home, food as medicine, connected fitness. I mean, let's look at those things and create a framework for why they are based around consumers' needs and how they can be successful, and dive into the economics and the tech and the strategy and what the experience looks like. Let's focus on those things. That's what we've been trying to do for several years now, but I'm calling it out. I'm inviting us to take a stand. I'm inviting us to do something about it, to act on it, and to start sharing more of that social proof. That's our mission here. That's the goal of this season. That's the goal of this podcast. And that is hopefully the goal of this community. I look forward to where we go from here. I look forward to making a difference even more. I look forward to moving the needle to this more preventive, longevity-based version of health and wellness that gets us all to a better place. And I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I look forward to sharing some of the guests this season. We have some fantastic guests coming up again this season. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.